Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Plastow. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Datatonic, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Ant as we have a discussion today about creative transformation. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Ant,
Hi everybody, I'm Ant. I work at Google Cloud as a principal consultant in Gen AI and MarTech. And thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for joining. What I'd actually love to kick off with is, how do you see creative transformation? How do you define it? And maybe what does that look like for, your average consumer like me and you, opposed to maybe like an enterprise, and how that looks for a marketing and creative team?
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's a good first question.
Big one.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty big. Well, I think when I think about it, I think the first thing you do is just comprehend like the word transformation itself and work out what it actually means. And a very good simple description of it is thinking about it being a significant change in form of something.
Yep.
Clearly, the thing that's changing or leading to the transformation is AI, artificial intelligence. Huge general purpose technology, which, in addition to sort of marketing in our everyday lives, is set to kind of turn everything upside down quite rapidly, I think. But I guess coming back to that context about marketing and what kind of transformation we'll see, I mean, it's fundamental. I think everything's going to change. I think we're going to see marketing moving from being quite a reactive discipline into one which is much more predictive.
Yeah.
Moment things are sort of predicated a little bit around like human intuition, whereas I think we're going to see more sort of dynamic data decision making. Certainly, at the moment there's a lot of sort of fixed aspects in marketing, whereas the future, again, through transformation, will make that much more dynamic in nature. And then the final bit, I think, as we can all probably relate to, at the moment everything's very human-led.
Yes.
Whereas I suspect we're going to enter this era of almost being human in the loop as opposed to human-led. So involved, but not necessarily driving the entire thing.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And yeah, for sure, the onset of that automation, and how can we remove things from that creative workflow that maybe is pulling us back, stopping us from going to market so much faster as well. I do have a slightly different question, maybe off script, but something that I've been thinking a lot about is, creativity generally comes from that point of friction, let's say. So it's all about, pushing the boundaries, trying something new. Do you think that with AI, that will either ease that friction, or it will just enhance it more and help us get to those points of friction maybe faster?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've been thinking about this quite a bit. In fact, yesterday I was in Paris talking to a client about this very thing. And we were sort of riffing around the idea that sometimes creativity is kind of born out of happy accidents.
Yes. Yeah.
And in a world where things are more sort of data driven and stuff, how do you still build in the time for those happy accidents to happen? And we kind of were talking about it kind of being a consequence of who's actually using the AI, or who's guiding or directing the AI to do things. And I think the more the generative AI is in the hands of the actual creative people themselves, I think those happy accidents can still occur as people are experimenting with an output from a prompt that was maybe pre-planned, but let's say for whatever reason it gets misinterpreted, something happens just by accident, and normally that accident might just be wiped out by somebody who wasn't more creatively minded.
Yes.
But I think what it allows to happen if the creative's in control is that they see that happy accident and then pursue it, and it actually becomes part of the process. So I think that's probably how it'll work, or sustain or remain.
Yeah, no, I love it, and it's all about adopting that technology, pushing it forward, like you say, and then those little moments of accident, inspiration, whatever it might be, we start to see some truly amazing things that AI can generate for us.
Yeah, definitely.
What I wanted to ask you next was how we're, seeing that speed and scale of which that we are able to now generate assets. And obviously with Google bringing out incredible tools like VO, Imagen, Chirp, etc., and collectively calling them GenMedia, how do you see those GenMedia tools helping with speed and scale?
So yeah, I think that's a great question, and the way I think about it is by also adding in like a third component, which would be quality. So you end up with the speed or the time it takes to make something, the quality, but then also the cost. And I think up till recently, we've been living in a world where only two of those things were possible at the same time. Whereas I think the advent of Gen AI actually opens the door to being able to have all three at the same time, mainly because it can do a lot of the adaptation work, and it's clearly a lot quicker to be able to do it. So yeah, and also the quality of it has improved so much recently. That I think it's all possible, and it's kind of exciting, but you're right to highlight, probably one of the biggest problems I think that faces the creative industry, which is if for instance we say for a while that marketing budgets, certainly the media side of it, has remained like static, if we're kind. I think what we've seen on the production front and production budgets is quite a rapid decline. But that's contrasted against the demands, which you referenced in terms of the number of things that you have to make for platforms, but also formats within platforms increasing. So it does present that problem. And I think up until now, people have been sort of approaching this with we'll make it for this one, and then it's good enough for this one. Whereas I think now, advent of Gen AI means that we can actually answer the brief and create things in a much more bespoke fashion to adhere to a lot of the best practices that people expect to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. From our perspective at Datatonic, we're working with a lot of customers who are on that journey right now as well. And I think one of the interesting things that we're also seeing come into play is how do we put in those frameworks to start understanding the ROI, quality, speed, scale, and all of those things. I wondered if you could share any examples that you've seen where you're working with customers that are maybe, adopting these tools into their workflow, and if they've seen any kind of return on that. So far.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the first thing that's actually sprung to mind is not necessarily an example of a customer who's integrated AI and then has found the benefits that they have, but actually was more of a sort of a industry level sort of data expert. And in the conversation we were having with them, we were talking to them about the potential for them to step into the fold, if you like, or step into the position of authority, because a lot of the time at the moment they are the arbitrators of whether a campaign has performed well. And it sort of struck me that what we're looking for as an industry really is like a benchmark of how to, in an authoritative way, how do you actually provide the evidence that suggests or validates that an outcome has been achieved. And I think if you can get to an authority that represents, tick complete, then it allows the industry to start moving to that as a remuneration principle. So that was quite interesting. That was the first thought. And then I think with regards, whether we see different clients of ours having adopted some of this technology and seeing benefits, I think fundamentally most of the benefits you'll hear about at the moment, just because of the nature of the type of projects that are happening, are projects which recognise sort of efficiencies as the KPI. So the speed to market or cost reductions. We're beginning, I think, as people's adoption of AI in general, but also generative AI in general. Generative AI, that's quite funny. You will begin to see more sort of effectiveness gains coming through, and also then linked, to ROI, as you can tell that the outcomes are getting better.
Absolutely. And from a B2B perspective, we're definitely working with customers who are kind of going back to our brief point as well, creating those better briefs, and therefore winning more work with them as well. So easily we're starting to see those links of how adopting one of these tools can instantly start gaining that return as well.
Definitely.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I think there was, I think it was around about this time last year, Google released some information that was talking about case studies, and it was they had 101 different case studies that were showing the benefit of adopting AI for different types of processes inside a company. That same report got released recently, And it's now 1,001 case studies that are now evidencing, the different benefits that companies have seen across lots of different industries, lots of different types of projects.
Hi, I'm Disha Panchal. I head up the cloud architecture team here at Datatonic. So, I spend my days workshopping, gathering requirements, and designing and building out our GenOps, GenMedia platforms. And really excited to be here with Mandie today. Mandie, would you like to introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Mandie Quartly. I'm an AI and machine learning customer engineer specialist at Google Cloud, which means I essentially focus on our Vertex AI platform, end-to-end AI. At the moment, that mostly means GenMedia and agents. Keep me very busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Such a great space to be in. I think GenMedia is super exciting and so tangible. With the rise of LLMs and them being more democratized, and the access to LLMs for non-technical users rising, what obstacles do you see for non-technical people in adopting GenMedia solutions? And how do you think that engineers or the more technical people could support them in adopting the solutions better?
So I think it's a really interesting question because certainly in the past, interacting with GenMedia models, with Gen AI models in general, has been quite technically focused. So sometimes it's code driven, sometimes there's almost a barrier to entry because you are needing to be able to write prompts, to do prompt engineering, to think about some of the specific language that you might need to use. And then there are various things that you can change for the different models. But I think actually, so we're seeing that the interaction with the models can become much more natural language. And so I think that's a really good step in the right direction so that you can start to iterate, change that, move that background, different stuff like that. But then I think from a technical point of view, I think there's there's a spectrum, which is being able to, and it depends on the user and what the user wants and how much control the user wants. So it may be that the user just wants to interact in natural language, doesn't want to add any context and nothing like that. So from a technical point of view, we can tweak stuff behind the scenes. So put a nice front end over it and add relevant context, add brand voice, add things around that. So examples of when. So it'd be tailor things very specifically to certain use cases, or equally we can kind of scale that back a bit and allow more transparency to the user so that they can see, so that they can change different things like temperature and creativity from that point of view. So I think there's different approaches that we can take, but it's certainly being helped by the newer models that are being released and how you interact with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see it being quite beneficial to allow non-technical users to be able to tweak temperature and sort of the more finer metrics, or is that still something that you'd say is better abstracted away?
I think it depends on the user. And I think some users don't want to know about that stuff. Yeah. And I think some users, as they start to understand or want to know more of the specifics behind the scenes and the greater control they can have. So I think it certainly depends on the user and the use case and the roles of the people that are interacting with the models. And it may be that some people just want it to be part of a usual front end. They don't even want to know it's AI. They just want to have it do whatever, create a summary, do this, create a picture of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I find a lot of times with clients that are very engaged or, super excited, they're like, I want to tweak everything, like every metric is something that they want to be able to define. So it's really interesting depending on the type of people and personas that you work with. So things are moving so quickly, new versions of models are being released, in 3-month or even sooner increments. So how do you build GenMedia solutions which can actually keep up with the rapid speed of releases? How would you go about maybe integrating the latest models or testing them? Yeah, what does that look like in terms of future-proofing these solutions?
It's a great question because, as you say, things are moving so quickly. And I mean, certainly, excuse me, in my job, I need to keep up on top of all of these things, and it's a full-time job keeping on top of all the new models. So I think with regard to future-proofing, I think the key things are assuming that models will continue to change. The pace may lessen We don't know at this point. So it's being agile and modular, I think, is probably the key pieces to that. So being able to plug and unplug models depending on what comes along. So being able to abstract away from the models potentially to give you that agnostic approach potentially, so that you have the possibility that the wider framework that you build, if new models come along, then you can also you can use those in that new framework, within that wider framework. I think also one key part of that is also is evaluation. So it could be very easy just to go, new models come along, brilliant, we'll just swap that in.
Yeah.
But it might not, it might interact, it might work slightly differently, you might need to change things in the background slightly. So evaluating the outputs from your models will be really important to be able to quantitatively say, this model is an improvement. And actually, do we want to change models? Is actually the model we have already good enough? But yeah, quantitatively say, there's a good reason to do this, and what benefits do we see from using new models?
I'm really curious. You mentioned quantitative, and one of my next questions was actually around quality standards of the outputs of models. There's ways to evaluate text-based models, but for sort of image, video generation, how do you quantify and how do you measure a successful model, or its accuracy, performance, etc.?
It's a fantastic question. It's an area I'm exploring with a lot of customers at the moment. So I think there's probably, so as you say, evaluation is absolutely essential, and there's two kind of main approaches that you may use in combination. So which is having a human in the loop, and having a human evaluate what your outputs are. But then also there is the possibility to be able to automate that as well. And it may be that you start off heavier on human in the loop to start off with, as you're trying to work out, well, what does good look like? Like, how do you quantify that outfit looks good?
Yeah.
How do you quantify that this particular image captures the brand's voice and the aesthetics that we're looking for? And some of that's really, really hard. And so I think there's the human in the loop, and taking advantage of the experience that your organization has to be able to point at good or bad or indifferent, but then automating that so that you can repeatably quantify things in a repeatable way. So for instance, within Vertex we have a full evaluation suite. We've got Gecko, which is an auto rater as part of the evaluation suite, which allows you to rate images and videos. So if you ask for an image of a coffee cup sitting on a steaming coffee cup sitting on a table next to a croissant, the model in the background can break down the key pieces that you're looking for. Are they there? Is the coffee steaming? And be able to give you a score as to how good an image is versus the prompt that you're looking for. So I think that's a good step in the right direction, but it's likely a combination of the two.
Yeah. How relevant are golden data sets?
Hugely relevant. Yeah, really, really relevant. And I think the kind of the thread I would go with for all of these things is that evaluation is so important. And golden data sets are hard to create, but so important to be able to, if you're swapping models in and out, how well is this doing? How well is my process doing? And then for when you're taking things into production, then also monitoring and saying, is this model still good enough? Have things changed? So yeah, really, really important.
Yeah, super interesting. Kind of leading on from that then, in terms of guardrails and ensuring the safety of the output. If we talk about GenMedia, if you're giving non-technical users access to a front end where they can explore their new campaign, and they can really trial and test out images and videos that they want to generate. How do guardrails, safety, responsible AI, how does that fit into an application like that or into that world?
It's really, really important. And so I think there are different levels of protection that you can use depending on your organization's appetite and need for being able to be very specific as to what comes out, and if it's to users within your organization or if it's users outside of your organization. So there's different routes that you can take. So there are things built into the tooling, for instance, watermarking. You will find in outputs from the Google Gen AI models, so images, videos, and text. And so that gives you the ability to be able to detect whether something has been AI created, which I think is, really important given the kind of things that you can create and how realistic everything looks now. So yes, then there are things at a model point of view, so you can then start to set levels for making sure that the language is, not rude, making sure that the outputs are what you would want to put in front of your end audience, whoever your end audience might be.